good day to give thanks unto the Lord. That's always true, but I'm feeling it just a little bit more now. Talking a lot about the will of God and sovereignty and how he plays in the affairs of men. And wouldn't you know it, that's like my favorite topic of all time. So I'm really glad to get a chance here on FaithWorks Live between you, me, and the microphone to be alive in a free country and the republic if we can keep it. So that's where we are, right at the crossroads. I've heard it said that everybody lives through history, but some people just make the history books. And we're in one of those moments right now. I actually didn't know. I mean, I was always a little jealous of the people in the history books. Like, well, what would it be like to live in a time where you know that things are changing and that nothing will ever be the same after that? And I think after the last week alone, I think it's safe to say, my friends, we are in that time. It is for such a time as this. That time is now. Buckle up, Buttercup. Here we are. Joel Kurtinitis is our special guest, helping us to parse through everything that we've just been through. And Joel, you and I were talking just before the recording started about how it feels to live in this time and just like sharing just normal everyday life. And yet now we're things are different now. It's such a strange synchronicity, perhaps. Maybe that's, I mean, I'm more comfortable with sovereignty, but I'll throw a few more syllables in there. Joel, first of all, how are you doing? And what is the future of the Republic? Go.
Oh my goodness, you have to have me breaking out the crystal ball already. No, I'm good. I think I'm reeling as much as anybody else is from the events of the last week. And we've been through, there's been a couple times like this in my life now. It's weird to actually consider that I'm turning 40 this year and I've got some history under my belt by now. But the feeling of the last week is undeniably similar to, the feeling after 9/11.
Yeah,
When
I agree.
I was a teenager, and I remember that, and the world just kind of stood still for a little bit, and everybody kind of went, what did we just see? What just happened? And there's this sudden recalibration that happens with kind of the normies, right? Like we're out here just kind of trying to see, how will this affect my life first? How will this affect my community and my country? Have we, where are we on the what's the scale where they move the nuclear scale or whatever? I'm not saying the right word. It's the mid threat level, right? The threat level scale, where they're kind of adjusting that. We're all sort of mentally doing that, right? Like, how close are we to civil war? How close are we to World War III? How close are we to all these things where we maintain that? And I feel like there's adjustments that have probably been made in this last week, and then there's the symptoms higher up the chain where you look and you see the political realignments that happen overnight after something like this, and that's been instructive too, to see where people jump when they're afraid.
Yes.
And so that's a little more cynical maybe, but also instructive.
It's the revealing, right? And people talk about the apocalypse or the end of days, but really what we see is what's revealed. And I really want to delve into that a bit. You mentioned how close it feels. I too remember 9/11 from my younger years. Yes, kids, I am that old, because they're thinking about it. It's like, you were there? Were the TVs black and white? I'm like, no, I actually not
the
quite.
internet made weird noises.
We had the internet. Yeah. Just barely, but we had like one computer and Frogger was on. But we laugh because we can't. And it's so strange to see this type of these types of events repeated in human the human nature that's revealed. Like you said, where we go when we're afraid tells us who we are. What we say when we're looking death in the face, or when we think about like the life as we know it, our nation, our freedom is in serious threat. And what we say in that moment reveals who we are. And I think there's been a lot of instructive, there's been some inspiration. I've been excited to see some of what's coming out in discussions about God and the will of God and the saving power of God. There's been some bad theology that's come out of this. So we'll just put that on the back burner for now. Let's not discuss that for just yet. The distance that, like, how close we are to a completely different world where no one is safe and we're not even having this conversation is about 3/4 of an inch.
Hmm.
And that's the distance from the top of the top of the ear to the inside of the human brain. And I don't know how you look at this whole situation, how you look at the iconic photos. Shout out to the reporters, because they almost nigh took a bullet in order to get those photos that will be the cover of your grandchildren's history book of Donald Trump, resistance fist raised, saying fight as the guards pull him down. The Secret Service pulls him down with the American flag flying in the background. All you needed was like a bald eagle, just like shining, just right in behind. No ideas, kids. Like, let's just keep it factually based. But that moment, that is etched on everyone's brain. How could you not be affected by something like that? And that in that moment, he was every proud American. In that moment, he is the spirit of the country, and he showed that level of courage. I've been the first to critique what I see as moral failings in Donald Trump, moral inconsistencies, outright lies and dishonesty, or a failure to protect the innocent. I don't need to catalog them now, but what I'm saying is we also should uphold moral virtues when our leaders display them. And that was the virtue of courage, tenacity, bravery that we so need in this age. And so I give him nothing but respect and honor for that. And I think every American that watches that, you go through all the emotions. You go through fear. I don't know the media's reaction. I'll table that. We'll put a pin in that one, because that one makes me mad enough to want to spit. But also, let's see if we can spit some fire about it in an instructive way. They were doing what they do. But if you are an honest red-blooded American looking at that moment, watching that like a minute and 17 seconds, that changes everything, you can't help but be emotionally impacted by it. At least that was how I feel. So maybe you have a completely different reaction, but what happens to you, Joel, in your mind and heart when you're seeing that? And do you think that this will be, I mean, as horrible as it is, this is not the way you'd want to go about unifying the country at all. And I understand that there are still lots of voices of division. They're not loud and strong. Like, they don't have the bullhorn and the platform right now. The message that I'm hearing overwhelmingly, even from people who are not typically politically active, they're not the wonks, they're not the ones to come out rhetorically. I think this rallied an awful lot of those average Americans on the fence, kind of moderate Americans, to support what they believe Trump stands for, just in seeing that raw courage in that one instant in time.
Hmm. Yeah, I can give a little bit of an object lesson here as far as how it's affected me directly, being that I'm on the same page with you, been very outspoken against Trump. I wrote an article for the Blaze back in the day that was something to the effect of five things you can never say after voting Trump, and it was talking about how you have to have a moral inconsistency if you support the man. So I've been very outspoken against him, um, and I've been receiving, since we live in Iowa, I've gotten, you know, donor text messages from him for what, since 2015.
Right.
It's been
They
20.
never stop.
Seriously, they never ever stop. Those of you who don't live in Iowa, you will never understand the trauma of political text messages up here. But it's next level. It's next level stuff. This was the first time this past week where I got one of those text messages and did not just immediately delete it and went, I think I can spare a few dollars. For the first time, I think I can spare a few dollars. I think this might be a turning point here, and it impacted me that strongly. It's not just because of the historic nature of the event, but like you suggested, and like I've heard others suggest too, that my immediate reaction when my wife came out and told me was he just won the election. But shortly after that was, oh my goodness, we were this close. We're this close. And everybody says that. And the unspoken part of that is, would we be in a civil war right now? There's a pretty good chance. There's a pretty good chance that there would be a lot more violence and conflict and shooting and chaos and the collapse of the institutions if that bullet had hit. Because at that point, if you're one of the millions of Americans who are on the Republican side, you feel like you've exhausted every other option. You feel like you followed the process, you took all the steps, you nominated the guy you wanted. They tried to put him in jail, and when that failed, they shot him. I'm saying that's the narrative. I'm not saying that's, but I'm not putting that out as my own
Mhm.
opinion. I'm saying that
Sure.
is inescapably what it would look like.
Right.
And it would be impossible to unprove that to a lot of
Mhm.
people. It'd be impossible to disprove that to millions of people.
Mhm.
So we
Yeah.
very much the mercy of God. No matter how you feel about the man, the mercy of God on America, that he was not killed in that moment.
Right. And I mean, I feel it incumbent to also mention that there was a man killed who was a hero. A a fire chief in his hometown, loving husband and father, who was there to support his principles and what he believed in, and died protecting his family. And I think all the people that sobering reminder that it was, we say, an assassination attempt, and we are so thankful that it failed, but it did kill a patriotic American, who was there just trying to follow the system and stand up for what he believes in, and support what he thought was right. And I think he deserves to be mourned and honored, and the people who are wounded as well. I know of at least two who were seriously wounded in that shooting, and so they they deserve honor, and really they deserve justice. And so I don't want that to get lost. They I'm sure would benefit from our prayers. Continue to pray for their families as well. I am all the more then disgusted and have no time for the denials that almost immediately took place, the softening of the language, saying we can't call it an assassination attempt. So now moving over to the media for just a hot second, because this one really grinds my gears. You ready? That's what everyone needs right now, is a good old fashioned rant. I saw the list of tidbits, the list of guidelines that they were giving to reporters. I think it was CBS at the time. I posted it on my X, so I'll go back and check. And the first line I agreed with. They said, stick with the facts. But then the rest of it was all complete and utter bunk designed to craft a narrative. And when people say that, I always kind of bristle. I'm like, well, a narrative is a story. We're trying to tell the facts. And if the facts tell a story, then all I'm trying to do is put it out there, and then people can decide. See, I'm old school, right? That's what we were
Mhm.
supposed to do, was report the facts. The problem is that they know what this looks like. And so they have to tamp down the reaction. They said, don't let the anchors use serious face. Don't call it an assassination. You're not supposed to look serious when someone shot the former and once and future president of the United States. We're not supposed to put on serious face. We're supposed to call it a popping noise. We're supposed to say he fell. We're supposed to say Secret Service like ushered him off stage. Why? Why do you suppose he fell? Why do you suppose we have people who are killed and or injured because of a popping noise? Are you kidding me? Like, that is the type of thing. You're not supposed to talk to witnesses, eyewitnesses that are there. They said no need to bring on guests at this time. What about people who are there? That's your job. My goodness. Whew. Okay, deep breath. Sometimes you just got to get it out. But the fact that, like, so this is like my circus and my monkeys in this moment, and this is disgraceful. If you
Mhm.
call yourself a reporter, a journalist, someone who cares about facts and truth, who is in this to, to record history, not to make it, that kind of thing, I will say props to the AP photographer who was out there risking life and limb. And he's the one who made history in this way. He's the one who captured and chronicled what happened. And it
Mhm.
was like almost providentially perfect if you look at
Mhm.
that photo, and we will be for many years to come. But
Mhm.
anyone and everyone who tried to deny reality here and tried their best to spin the facts to paint a picture that is contrary to the truth deserves to be ashamed. And I have to put that out there. Just for the good of all mankind and everything that is holy, this is not right. Don't ever do this, guys. This is why people don't trust you.
Yeah,
You go
compare
ahead.
this,
The floor is yours.
compare the credulity here with what we got in the wake of, for instance, Jussie Smollett's claims
Ugh.
that in the middle of the night he got beat up by some racist white guys.
Mhm. Oh,
That sort of thing, that was immediately, that was all the evidence that the media needed at the time, was just he said so. And here this happens on video in front of a crowd everywhere, and were getting gaslit about
Mhm.
it right off the bat. Not because there was any question about what happened, but because they didn't want to acknowledge what happened. They didn't have time to get in the back room and figure out how to spin it yet.
Yeah.
Um, and so and what's awful about it is, so that was the original awful, and then you had in I had a harder time, honestly, with the political follow up and the statements that have been issued from the left since then, which is, okay, well, we can't deny the facts, so instead we're just going to say, well, it's the whataboutism, right? It's the
Mm.
Biden gets in front of the cameras to say we need to back down the rhetoric and cool the temperature, and then proceeds to list off a bunch of Republican, finger wagging at Republicans for being too violent, and then throws tacks on Trump's assassination attempt on the end to say, see, we all need to just cool our jets here.
Mm.
And the disingenuous nature, and that's been picked up. That is the angle now. That's been picked up. I saw I think an NPR article earlier today talking about how, oh, there's been political violence for all these number of years. We should have seen this coming. It's all Republicans. There's been 14 documented cases of political violence, and 13 of them were from the right, was what that article had said. And I am sitting here going, do you remember when a Bernie Sanders guy shot up a baseball game?
Yeah, tell
Um,
that to
I,
Steve
I,
Scalise.
yeah, I remember that. But but that's the spin though. That's the spin though. If it's undeniable, then, well, see, it's, Gretchen Whitmer got kidnapped, or there's a plan to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. So
Yeah,
that's the same thing. It's the same
by
thing.
the
Totally the same
feds.
thing. Right.
By the
Right.
feds.
Exactly. Totally the same thing.
Let's just
Or
put that
they like
out
to.
there.
Yeah.
Oh man, this is my face when I bite my tongue. I'm so the ridiculousness, the fact that we're supposed to not believe anything. This is what leads people into well and true like conspiracy theory territory.
Hmm.
And I've
Yeah.
heard some juicy ones about all of this since we're at the crossroads of politics and security, because that's a
Hmm.
big part of this conversation. I'm going to dedicate a whole hour with Michael Letts, who's a security expert. We're going to talk about that later this week. But all of people are looking for a reason, right? They look for reason, they look for explanations. And if the explanation over and over again that they're being given is told by the same people that say, well, you know what, you really didn't see what you saw. You didn't experience what you saw. You're really the bad guys. You need to sit down, shut up, let us do the thinking for you. Just believe whatever stories you put out there. You know what people are not going to do? They're not going to trust you anymore. They're not going to believe what you say. That can lead people off into some wild territory. I'll just, say as a measure of, reason and discernment. Let's be wise about what we're saying and what we're putting out there. But these are questions that demand answers. How is it that this guy got up on the rooftop? How is it that when you have, audience members, spectators screaming, there's a guy with a gun on the roof, and you're supposed to have the elite forces out there protecting,
Hmm.
why didn't they get him off stage? I'm not saying you need to rush in with firepower. I understand. Believe me, I understand the liability and the detriment, the high risk scenario that you're facing here. And I'm not trying to second guess without understanding or without fact. So I'm not trying to speak out of turn, but at least you could have gotten the guy off stage. You would do
Hmm.
that. If you had a
Right.
high priority asset, a target, you knew that someone was trying to target, and there was any question about it, what you should have done is get him off stage. That
Hmm.
did not happen. And that lapse in judgment alone is enough to mean investigation and probably instant firings for
Hmm.
everybody that was involved in responding to this scenario. Why wasn't there a policeman on that particular rooftop, that vantage point? Why wouldn't there have been somebody to be watching that? Like, these are simple questions, simple things that even I could figure out. So the fact that the elites and the betters, and that we were told this is the best that we can do, this is the best our country has to offer, and we're the best, so this is the best, it failed, and there's no other word for it. So yeah, we're going to delve into that quite a bit more. I'm urging people not to go into conspiracy theory territory, but I understand, because all of these questions demand answers, and it doesn't seem like right now any of the answers are good.
Yeah, and a lot of it comes to, the question of what's a conspiracy theory really comes down to the definition of what happened, right? Because I'm
Yep.
not gonna, don't worry, I'm not gonna, drag you down that path. I know you got another episode coming up on it, but there's that, it goes back to what I was talking about in terms of that definitions they used for political violence, right?
Hmm.
And that's even worse, I think, than just the straight up gaslighting, because what you're doing then is breaking down the possibility of rational discussion. We can't
Hmm.
have a conversation about political violence if you're calling it one thing and I'm calling it another. And so if you destroy that commonality, and in the same way, you're talking about the procedures of the Secret Service and all of these things, you have to have a baseline. And in the security world, you've got that baseline. But as this whole thing unfolds, I think there's going to be this attempt to just snip those lines of communication between Americans so that we're seeing different things and we're
Yeah.
saying different things. Honestly, that's their damage control, right? Is will stop the dialogue. And I think that's what we need to watch out for here.
Well, if they can't control it, right? That's the concern. And in that case, like we always joke, the difference between the facts, the conspiracy theorist and the chronicle of history is about 6 months. So we just gotta wait. Like I said, just wait, reserve judgment. Don't crow
Mhm.
too loud, but pray it up and keep your eyes open and your mind going, and we shall see what the truth will out, is all I will say on that. Also, the code word is pineapple. Um, Oh man, Joel, there's been so much going on. So we have this obviously like life-changing, history-making moment. A lot of people scared. I think on the spiritual side of things, I'd love to bring that in a bit now because, like you said, another similarity to 9/11 is that the nation um was shaken. The nation that felt so powerful and secure, and we're even now, like everybody realizes that we're in a kind of a tinderbox, that we're in a divided, like antebellum, just pre-antebellum moment is what it feels like. If you look historically, we've got a very divided nation, and it doesn't take much just to set something off. This is the concern, and you articulated it well. But I'm seeing a lot more spiritual attention, especially from conservatives. I'm not sure if I've seen a full-on conversion happen from someone on the left, but hopefully it's out there. The challenge that we have, I think, is to make sure that we're turning back to God and not just honoring God because he fits our preferences or our narrative, because we have narratives of our own. As hard as I
Mhm.
just went after those on the left and their media operatives for crafting that narrative and forcing people to accept it, I want to be sure that as Christians, we're using this as a moment to genuinely turn people back to our Almighty God, our loving Father, our Savior in Jesus Christ, and that we're not taking it off in some weird directions, putting all of that now. Like there's one Lord and mediator, and that is Jesus, and we can
Mhm.
all serve him. And it does definitely appear that God has his hand on these events and these people in this time. And it does seem like Donald Trump has a big part to play in that, but he is not Jesus. And I just need
Mhm.
to put that out there. I pray for him, and I pray for his safety, for his family, for his leadership. I believe he will be the next leader of the United States by God's grace. It's just ever more obvious now that there's a lot of the hand of God at work in the affairs of men. It's always there, but he's just given us like he's putting a spotlight right here, right on it. Now it's just obvious. But I just want to make sure that we're remembering who is God.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a question of opportunity there. And that was again, that's that adrenaline rush right after you hear about it that says, wow, we almost weren't living in this same timeline anymore. And I think that should, as believers, remind us to redeem the time,
Mm.
because we don't know how much time and opportunity we have left for the things that we currently consider important. And so, if you do consider it important, if you want that opportunity to reach out to your neighbor and share the gospel with him before you are dragged off to a prison camp, for
Mm.
instance, um, might want to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
The priority changes that we need to be looking at as people, and just to even broaden that further, there's the spiritual reality that we need to be addressing first and foremost in our own hearts, the purification of the church, our continued ministry and outreach to the world while we have time and opportunity. But also beyond that, there's the question of timing for other things as well, in terms of, okay, well, at what point does our culture war escalate? People, for people to be watching all of this going down, like I said, I think we were probably millimeters away from there being real domestic, you know, urban warfare going on here in America. And so looking at that, I think that, in that moment, that's not the time to make the decision about what you and
Hmm.
your family are going to do. It's well
Right.
before that. It's well before that. And so, not knowing now, it's the reminder, right? That's the knock at the door. And so I think we need to treat it that way, both spiritually and also politically.
Hmm. Yeah. And that can be scary for a lot of people if they find themselves unprepared. We talk a lot about wake up calls. That's been a metaphor. And I think biblically, it's also a metaphor that there are a lot of people who are maybe awake now. I pray that that's the case. Rise, O sleeper. But for us, as a Christian, that means something different. It means more than who we vote for. It means more, it should encapsulate the way we speak to our neighbors. But I think so many of us have been silent for a very long time that now is the time to speak up in a big way. Now is the time to, as you said, share the gospel first and foremost. Yes, there's political application for all of this. We've been talking about it in a largely political and therefore temporal way. But the reason that God appoints every one of us here and now, and every person from the beginning of time in their place, in their nation, for their time, is what? So Acts 17 tells us it's so that men would seek God, that they would reach out and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. That's what this whole thing is about, is to display his glory. And that, I think, is the message that I hope Christians are bold with. Now, I mean, if you support Donald Trump, that's absolutely wonderful. I totally get it. I think he's going to win in a landslide that defies, that breaks all boundaries for what landslides have been. And I truly pray that that makes us a more secure, a safer, a freer nation, that turns back to the light of God and his righteousness in our governance. But ultimately, this has to motivate us to say any one of us could meet our end at any time. That tomorrow is not promised us. I think that's a big, hopefully, wake up call from all of this. Just on just to get biblical up in here, is that man is appointed unto man once to die, and after that, the judgment. And you're going to meet the King of all kings, Donald Trump included. Every single one of us. It wasn't his time wasn't yesterday, but it might be tomorrow. My time wasn't, today, but it might be tomorrow. And so I need to live every single moment and make my decisions and speak my words and love my children and, write my thoughts and even pontificate, hopefully, in light of that, motivated by the Spirit, in light of eternity. Today is what we have, and today is the day of salvation.
Well, not to rain on your parade, but today is not over yet. So.
Some friend you are. Come on now. Here's hoping. Maranatha.
Hey, you don't want to be the guy
Don't
tearing down his
count me
barns
out
and
yet.
building bigger ones, right?
Oh man.
Yeah. No,
True.
I'm just kidding. I'm just
I
kidding.
get you. I get you.
I could not resist.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. I
Nope.
appreciate it.
Well,
Well,
so
and
you,
and
yeah.
there's been so much that's going on right from the lens of eternity. I just think we got a lot of work to do. That's all I'm saying. And we need to get busy about it. And honestly, just to humble myself here for a second, I do struggle with procrastination. People that know my upload schedule and bug me about not having new episodes, you're aware of that. I confess that sometimes it's not that I don't have a lot going on at Haney House, but sometimes I do procrastinate when it comes to certain things that I know will be work. And when you've got 6 kids screaming in the background, it's hard to find quiet time. So putting that out there. The truth of the matter, though, is that we don't have time to procrastinate. Let us not assume that the sovereign God owes us tomorrow to do what we should have done today. He gives us our mission and he gives us the time in which to complete it. And I like the is it JC Riley line that he says that all of us are immortal until we're done with what God calls us to do. Until God says otherwise, basically, we're all immortal. And I mean, if we think about it, like God has appointed the end from the beginning. So he's not surprised by any of this that comes up, but we shouldn't be either. We should live every day. We don't know it. He does. And so since we are in the palm of his hand and nothing is going to get us or hurt us before he's appointed that it should be so, I think that ought to give us more courage than any, superhero that Marvel can dream up. That's it. That's who we are. We should be the people of the most confidence and courage when it comes to taking moral stands, because what can the world do to me? Nothing that hasn't passed through the sovereign hand of God.
Right. Colossians 3, our lives are hid with Christ in God. And that verse has been a comfort to me through many scary things,
Mm-hmm.
and dangerous things in my life, is that we are dead and our lives are hid with Christ in God. Therefore, yeah, it makes sense to be bold. It makes sense to prepare for hardship, and to be wise about how we invest what God has given us while we're here,
Mm-hmm.
because we don't know
Very
how long
true.
we're going to have it.
Very true. And that it's making the most of this moment, because eternity is a long time.
Hmm.
And I want as many people that I know and love there with me as possible. Um, Turning our attention to all the other things that have gone on. So that happened.
Yeah, right. You
And
got to
then
mention it in passing.
that happened, and then nothing was ever the same. And then moving on, we had so much else. I was like, we were
Yes.
talking about this, feeling like Frogger in here, because I'm trying to let things cool off so that I can percolate, gather my facts, and then respond in the realm of, radio/podcast. And I haven't been able to do any of that because more stuff keeps happening, wouldn't you know? And so, like Frogger, I'm hopping from lily pad to lily pad of current events and trying to figure out in these twisting streams of time what I can contribute to this conversation. So thank you, Joel, for helping me navigate that. So after the shooting attempt, there are the shooting and the assassination attempt. Then you have Joe Biden coming out and responding, and that was pretty lackluster and disgraceful as a result. Like, he had a moment in history, he had an opportunity, and while he didn't like absolutely lambast the president or something like that, he came pretty close. It was
Hmm.
it was chiding, and I think it was childish as a result. I think he was speaking to
Yeah.
his base. I don't think
Hmm.
he had any care or concern. He knew enough to come out and not declare victory or be triumphant or something like that. But he basically was like, hey, this is not appropriate, which is the
Hmm.
weakest possible condemnation I could think of. And then it's like he shuffles off and goes back to bed. So no confidence there. Again, pray for your leaders, pray for Joe Biden, and he needs to know Christ, is what I will say.
Hmm.
But then after that, Donald Trump announces so much anticipated who his VP would be, and he announced that Ohio Congressman JD Vance would be the pick, and he is someone who, as I've not actually met him in person. Some of the other names I have it on him. And he has gained a lot of attention for hillbilly elegy. And he's gained kind of being more of like a voice for the working class in the Republican Party. He's been a Trump loyalist for a while. I think at the beginning he kind of wasn't, but then in the last 4 years, he's definitely been hitched, I think, 100% to Team Trump. And so this is, in my opinion, this is not Trump trying to shore up, because lots of times VPs will do that. They'll say, well, if you're considered weak in one political area, you'll pick a VP from a state or with the loyalty of a certain demographic that will shore up your weaknesses. This is not a political pick for him. This is, I want someone who 1000% has my back. And so he's my ultimate wingman. And to me, that's what I see in JD Vance. What do you think?
So I think that's probably pretty true. There's two elements that I think will play out well for him. One more tongue in cheek than the other. So first of all, I think he's capable of shredding Kamala Harris, which is going to be fantastic. I mean, not that it takes much to shred Kamala Harris, but to the extent that there is a comparison between them, there's no comparison between them. And I think that's going to be evident. I think that's going to be pretty evident. I think that Vance is very charismatic, and that's going to be a draw for a lot of folks. There was a clear contrast when you saw the lineup of
Mhm.
possible names. No disrespect to Doug Burgum, but he doesn't get anybody's dander up. He's just very blasé. Um,
Bergamentum doesn't exist.
yes. So I think that contrast is good. It's good to see him pick somebody who can actually go out there and start making making a difference and making waves on the national media front as well. And Vance has done that capably. Two, my wife brought this up right away when the pick was announced. He has a beard. Uh, many
Yes.
bonus points. Many bonus points for being a candidate for national office and yeah, running to the vice presidency with a beard.
You're right.
I
You know
hope
what? Christy Gnome can't compete. Not
that's right.
he wins
Fear,
hands
fear the
down.
beard. Fear the beard. He needs to grow it out, and he can turn that into a campaign strategy. And I'm right here for the thank you cards. So
Bring back the Benjamin Harrison.
yes, yes, we are our lack of diversity in hairstyles in the federal government is appalling to me. I think that in the name of diversity and inclusion, we need all sorts of beards
Fair
going
enough.
on in the state
Trump
house
should go
and
like
the
a
White
Teddy
House.
Roosevelt mustache. That'd be funny.
Yes,
He's the
I see no
bull
reason. I
moose.
see no. There's no counter argument. I refuse to acknowledge counter arguments to this. So there's another point in
I like
Vance's
that.
favor.
That's funny. I will say that I knew that he was openly courting this from a lot of the things that he said. He's been a Trump loyalist, and I was disappointed to see that someone who is Catholic was softening on abortion along with the Trump team to be in alignment
Yeah.
with that, and that would be a pivot towards what's happening at the RNC recently. And what I think a lot of Republicans are, at least like my brand of Republicans who are in it for the principle, who are in it for the platform, who are in it for the issues. I am not. She was not a team player. I don't mind being on a big tent, like a wide tent, as long as we're focused on the things that matter the most. And what I'm seeing right now, and what I am concerned about. So a lot of this is very, rah rah, go team GOP unity, which frankly I'm very uncomfortable with because I've never been in the popular crowd of anything politically speaking. So I guess just take that for what it's worth. But y'all know that my big issue is life, it's marriage and family, and it is, crafting not only a free society, but that freedom has to come based on the principles of that lead to abundant life. And if you're a Christian or not, I care about you living in a free society that's ordered around the author of all life, because that's how you're going to flourish. And that's what I believe is best for my nation, best for my neighbors, best for me, for my family, and for our future and our legacy. So that's what I fight for. And I fight for everybody's right to live and to be free in our nation according to those principles.
To party.
The problem is I don't think my party agrees with me, and everything now at the RNC has been orchestrated around electability. What happened is Donald Trump's people, and now they won't return my calls, funnily enough, but Donald Trump's people came in and rewrote the RNC platform, and we knew this from months ago when they tried to do this at the state level. And here in our state, there was a huge fight over basically stripping the pro-life platform, the pro-marriage platforms, weakening Second Amendment platforms, removing, basically any mention of God and our creator and loyalty to him out of because the Iowa platform is pretty strong. So we saw this up close and personal, and there was like one teenage whippersnapper that came in, created this like pro-Trump fervor and took over the platform, and they had to fight for hours. Like the actual delegates, the people who are the grassroots that we all claim to love and respect, the real conservatives that were in there, fought for hours to get this stuff put back in the platform because they tried to railroad it out. Well, basically the same thing just happened at the national level, and this happened, and we knew it was going to happen because the platform was proposed and then presented at the convention. So all of that to say, not to get lost in the political weeds, but what really matters and what really angers, and I think rightly so, these delegates, is that they were just railroaded. They were not allowed to speak to these things that we believe in so strongly. Basically, national RNC, the national synonymous with the Trump campaign, came in and said, this is what we think is going to take to get reelected. This is what we think is going to, appeal to the most people. We've got to be pragmatic here. And they literally shut off the mics of anybody who objected. They demanded a vote from the platform committee, and then presented last night. They said, I have heard from people now who were delegates on the floor. And they said, if we got up and we tried to get up and object, and they shut off the mics. Where have we heard this before? Where of it, like, this is not new.
Are you asking me as a Ron Paul guy? Because I remember this.
Spill the
I
tea.
remember.
Spill the tea,
Yes.
Joel.
No. Do you remember do you remember it was at the RNC?
Yep.
Remember there was questions about that, and the one Joan the Silencer. Remember the Joan
Yes.
the Silencer memes?
Yes.
The lady at the convention who like held up her folder between somebody's mouth and the microphone, that sort of thing. I mean, conventions and political parties at the root are about power. And what's frustrating to me, this has always been, the frustrating part of Team Trump, is that there is so much power there that it is attractive to the very worst kinds of people and the very worst elements within the party, who in many cases are the career political types, right? Who wouldn't have a job or a useful skill set if they weren't hanging around important people. And you and I know, we know, we could name names on those ones. But
But let us have grace.
let us have
Let us
grace.
have
Yes.
grace.
Yes. So there's that power structure that's there, that's very attractive, I think, to the moderates who have been for a while, they've lost their Romneys, right? They've lost their McCains, they've lost their Lindsey Grahams. Nobody is running anymore on the things that they like being said, because that's what they grew up with, and that's what their daddy said was, important to running a good business. And so so I think that there's an opportunity that they see to grab a hold of Trump and steer the Republican Party back in the direction that they're comfortable with. And frankly, I just don't think that Trump himself cares, because he's already on the record. And I think that's the really frustrating part for me as a conservative, to see what's happening on the platform committee, is you didn't need to do that. Trump's already on the record. If
Right.
anybody hit Trump in a debate or in the news with you're too, you're too pro-life, you're too radically pro-life, he could just very easily say, no, I'm not. Here's my statements, here's my actions, over, the end. They didn't
Yep.
need to go after the platform. It was people taking advantage of the situation in his
Mhm.
name to go after the platform.
Yep.
And we know this because as Republicans, we're used to our people ignoring the platform for decades at a time. And so,
Right.
like, you
That's
don't
not
have to
new.
be aligned with the platform, right? I mean,
Unfortunate, but not new.
there's been arguments for even just getting rid of the party platform completely.
Hmm.
And so, like, but the fact that they went through the trouble and to strong arm the convention in this direction, that is what bothers me. I think it bothers a lot of conservatives, because it raises the same old questions that we never wanted to have again after 2016, which is, well, which Trump are we going to get? Are
Yep.
we going to get the Trump who says, these moderate, goofy things that are not in alignment with the Republican platform at all? Or are we going to get the one who gets in office and says, I'm going to go handle this over here. Here you go, Heritage Foundation, go do your thing.
Hmm.
You know,
Yep.
Project 2025. Uh, so, so
All
I
day
think that's the
long.
question that, yeah, that's the question that it's raising right now for all of us, right? Which is,
Yep.
and I don't think, I mean, I'm just real talk here. I don't think that it's going to affect anything in terms of the election at this point. I'm just being real. I would love to say that, as a proud pro-lifer who has made a lot of threats about not voting
Hmm.
for people over the years,
Yeah.
after what happened in the past week, I don't think it's going to tip the polls at all. Um, because again, it's a historic moment, right?
Yeah.
It's not, this is not business as usual, and I think everybody senses that. Doesn't mean that you have an excuse to compromise your principles. What I'm saying is, looking at the polls, looking at the numbers, looking at the demographics, this is the way I see it playing out.
Yeah.
Which is different than saying this is how it should play out.
Sure. Well, and that's why it's the ultimate unforced error, is because none of this needed to happen. He would
Mm-hmm.
have won. And I mean, even if, that assassination attempt hadn't happened, I think he still
Mm-hmm.
was on track to win. I think conservatives were
Yeah.
more fired up than ever to vote for him. And then to undercut your base at exactly this moment proves a couple of things. One, you don't like us any more than we liked you. Like, this is just obvious. He's just not that into you. And we've known this for decades at this point, that there's been these tensions and these fractures. And the folks that would used to give lip service to the principles and then ignore them when they got elected, now they're just out and out saying, you don't really have a place at this table. Shut up and sit down until election day. So there's that. Like, since we're being for real, the thing that I'm the most disappointed in, like you said, Joel, electorally, this is not going to make any difference. I know that's going to be true. There may be a few people who decide based on this that that they just can't pull the lever. What I know is, after he's essentially been coronated here, given the fact that he took a bullet for the country, like, that is also a fact. That is also true. And his character was revealed in that to be a fighter. So if you want someone that's going to fight for our nation, even if we're not entirely on the same page, and he's still, like, if he could just apply that same tenacity to the preborn, then we'd be in business, man. Then I would be flying the flag higher than anybody. Like, so there's so much Man, we live in this fallen world. This fallen world gets in the way. This is why we can't have nice things. So all of that being said, and with as much discernment as I can possibly muster, I think the area that I'm most disappointed in is the immediate justification from Christian, pro-life, pro-family, pro-voting groups.
Yeah.
They have no excuse. They need to be
Mhm.
the clarion call. I say they at the church, and then parachurch organizations, right? People who are arranged to bring Christian principles into political engagement and to figure out how we as Christians can vote biblically for the saving of many souls, but also for the alignment of our nation with God's righteousness. They are the people that have no excuse. I am very
Mhm.
disappointed with the statements that I've seen, because their job is to hold up the standard and to hold elected officials accountable to shine the light. And so if all you're going to say is, yeah, that stinks, but what else are we going to do? We're just going to keep
Mhm.
on moving forward, then there's no cost. There's
Right.
absolutely no cost for the compromise and the capitulation. And we've seen that so long that I'm just tired. Like, I sound like a broken record at this point, even to myself, because I'm the one person. Well, it's me and we happy few that are willing to stand up and take the slings and arrows, because we've seen this coming over and over again on issues of life, which to me is the only reason that I keep getting dragged back into this political cesspool again and again.
Mhm.
Yeah, they tore the rug out from under us. I suppose that's to be expected. It causes me to seriously question beyond this election cycle, if you're looking
Mhm.
long term, because I had this conversation with Jason Whitlock, and
Mhm.
he was talking about the Amber Rose thing, which we haven't mentioned yet, but Amber Rose, former porn star, also pro-abortion. To my knowledge, I don't think she's made a public statement denying that. Most well known for showing her private parts in public and dating rappers and, all of that kind of thing. She has now openly switched to Donald Trump. And so they invited her to be a very prominent speaker at the RNC with the interest of building a bigger tent, appealing again, that, like, I can see why they're doing it, and I'm glad that she is, in a place in her journey where she's moving more towards what I think are life-giving principles, pro-freedom principles. But ultimately, the only reason you do that is to create a big tent for this election.
Mhm.
And so there's this big debate, like, are we supposed to have people, that disagree with us, that are going to bring more people in, and it's going to make us more popular to that? Like, we're just trying to be popular. And I said, this is good for this election cycle alone. This is it. If what we're uniting around is just this mere moment, then that's all we've got. If we're uniting around principles, if that's what's supposed to be, I think truth brings unity. And what we're all standing for has to be in common. We can be widely diverse, absolutely. But what we can't be is, we also have to be united around what is true and the direction and the vision for the country. And we don't have that. We've simply abdicated that. And now we're running contrary to it.
Well, so the concept of a big tent needs to be, you're welcome here. We're going this way.
Yes.
Come along. We're going this way. At what point the big tent becomes confusion around moral clarity and purpose, then what's the point? It's not, we're going the wrong way. And that's the thing. Particularly for conservatives and Christians, we don't have the luxury of going any other way. Our lordship is devoted to Christ. Like he is our Lord. We don't have
Mm-hmm.
any other option there. It's not like we can just agree to disagree. Okay, we'll go with you on these things. It's not going to work that way. And so, for us to be able to work together with others, there
Mm-hmm.
has to be clarity around direction. And the thing is, it's not smart. It's not smart, even from a worldly perspective. So one of the qualifications for leadership within the church, according to the New Testament, is not a novice,
Mm.
lest being lifted up with pride, he fall into temptation and the snare of the devil. That is a thing. Your church should not be hiring a pastor fresh out of seminary. It shouldn't
Right.
be a thing. You should not be lifting up people who are brand new baby Christians, not because the Lord doesn't love them, not because they're not your brother or sister, but because they are not qualified. The
Mm-hmm.
character is not there yet. And businesses know this. You don't take somebody that just started behind the register and make them CEO the next day. You don't do that. Like this in every other area of life, we anticipate that there needs to be a track record of sound judgment,
Mm-hmm.
of fortitude, of
Sure.
moral clarity, of direction, of leadership. Uh, the fact that we are doing this at the Republican Party level is uh, it's pretty big implication of what we consider leaders. Because it's one thing. Am I glad that she's going to vote for Trump? Absolutely. I don't even know who this person is, but if she's going to vote Republican this year, great. That's terrific. Uh, Next, I would advise learn about why it's better to vote Republican. Learn about the principles behind this, um, and follow along in the path of people who have actually blazed this trail before.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. I'm thrilled with anybody that wants to come along, but if you want to find out, if you want to reveal the heart of somebody who is there and see if a person who's been on camera her whole life just wants more cameras, one way to do that would be to say, "There's no glory in this. Are you coming anyway?"
Yep.
That's really the question. That's the question for all of us. There's no glory here. Are you willing to do the work? And if no, you don't want them in front of your camera either. That's the test. And so I feel like no matter what area of life you're applying this to, it's very, very important to keep that in mind. And I feel like it's been years now. And you could even take it further. The RNC is not inherently conservative, but CPAC was supposed to be. And the stories coming out of CPAC for years running now are that there's giant binge drinking parties and everyone's sleeping around with everyone else, and like this is CPAC. This is the conservative wing of the conservative party, and it's been a running joke for years now. So I think absolutely there's this appearance, just like with the seeker friendly church movement, that we'll just find popular people and slap them on posters and put them in front of a microphone and a camera, and that plus a little internet magic, and we'll be in ship shape. It's not going to work out that way. And even if it works out that way in the short term, you're not going to get people that are actually going to do you any good in the long term if you can't provide direction and you can't provide vision there. And that is, frankly, best left to boring people a lot of times.
Right.
People people. When I say boring, in a lot of ways, that's a synonym for faithful, because
I
faithful
like
life
that.
often looks boring.
Yeah.
It does. It's steady. It's consistent. It's day after day after day, beating your head on that wall and going, "I can do this." With Christ, my Lord, I can do this. One more step. One more step. You don't get that. You don't get that as an online influencer. You don't get that
Right.
from living on social media. You don't get that from instant notoriety and making a meme that gets 1 million shares. Not that I don't aspire to that, but still. That comes from faithful living. And so
Yeah.
that's what I just wish, and I feel like, honestly, to roll this back to our place as believers and a view toward eternity, Jesus said, "Many of the last shall be first and the first shall be last." We all know that. But have you ever stopped to consider what that means in view of eternity? There will be people who you realize as great in heaven whose names you don't know now, whose names almost no one knows now. And I think that should give us real pause when it comes to selecting leaders, to putting people on platforms, that we don't really know what's important. We can sense that things like this, we talk about historic moments, sure, but how many historic moments were completely irrelevant to this in our minds because we can't see? So I didn't mean to wax all theological there, but I just think
No,
when
that's
it comes to
awesome.
selecting leadership, it's just really important to remember that in a steward, it's required that a man be found faithful. That's the prime quality. If you can't show that in your leaders, whether it's Trump or whether it's this person at the RNC, if you can't show that, you have a problem.
Yeah. And I've thought that long and hard, that the God who rewards what is done in secret, that the God who, in contrast to what we see with our eyes when we choose our leaders, that God, looks at the heart. And that was said specifically in the context of civic leaders, that the people who are counted out in this world are, that are not glamorous, that are us boring, happy, faithful few, that there's hope for all of us, Joel. If the boring people are the ones who are going to make it, this is, yes, one qualification down. The struggle that we have is seeing in this moment with what the world tells us is important and how you can be big. God never called his people to be big. He called them to be bold and brave. He called them to be faithful, not the influencers of this world. The power of the cross is what makes the difference. It's not about us. And I think the more that we could realize that, and where I'd love to park the conversation just for today, because this is exactly what we need to hear, at least what I need to hear, so I'll speak for me, is what I need to hear today, I turned to First John earlier this morning, First John 5. So right at the end, the very ending message of this letter that John writes in love, and he calls his recipients his children, his brothers, his sisters, but he speaks to them and as a loving father or as an older brother might. And he says, we know that the one, he talks about the evil one, we know that we are from God and the whole world lies in the power of the evil one. And we know that the Son of God has come and has given us understanding so that we may know him who is true, and we are in him who is true, is his Son, Jesus Christ. He is the true God and eternal life. And then the last thing he says is, little children, guard yourselves from idols. Keep yourselves from idols. And that's so powerful when you think about that. There's this understanding of who we are if we are in him. We have to know who he is. That's what we should be lifting up high, is who is Jesus Christ, the truth, the life, the way. That's all in him. That's not about us. That's about him. We lift him high. But what we can do is to keep ourselves away from anything that's going to compete with that for kingship and for loyalty in our hearts. And I mean, that could be a literal statue, but more often than not, it's other things that we think, well, this can take the place of God for this. This can get me what I want over here. This will be better for me for the here and now here, and God will understand. And it'll be all right to have these competing loyalties, and it's really not. It's not. If we want to follow single-mindedly after Christ, we have to tear down the idols in our own hearts first, in our own minds, in our families, in our time, what we do with what God has given us, our time, our talents, our treasures. There's the old, preacher alliteration coming in. God has to come first in all of those things. So get rid of the idols in our lives. That's my challenge to myself first. And then to everyone who's out there listening, tear down the idols, keep on guard to be single-mindedly focused on Christ and his kingdom. He is coming. He is coming. Let us be found faithful. He has given us our country. He's given us our freedom for this moment, for a little while longer. I don't know what he's going to do tomorrow, but he has given us this moment to proclaim the gospel, and he is coming. Let us be found faithful. Thank you, Joel. Any last words?
Nope. I just
All
amen.
right.
I'm just giving an amen.
Amen all day long. Well, that I better say no more. Thank you, my friend, brother. Appreciate that. All of your insights, for your constant faithfulness, for being willing to speak as a voice in the wilderness. It is not always popular, but that's okay, because that's not the goal. If we have the audience of one and he finds us faithful, that is more than reward enough. It's more than worth any crown. All those crowns we're going to cast at his feet anyway. So thank you, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Anytime. And until next time, I truly believe what I just said, that we must be found faithful, and that it's a super big challenge in this world to get rid of the distractions, to get rid of the competing loyalties. Those little roots tend to spring up before we even know it. So help us, Lord, today to stay focused as your people on the coming King, to be ambassadors first of the kingdom of heaven. Yes, we care about our country. Yes, we care about our children, our legacy, posterity, our freedoms, all of those things. But for what? Is so that men would seek God, so that we would be the image of Christ to the lost and dying world all around us. That is the moment for which we were made, is for this moment. Help us, ready us, equip us, armor us, so that we can be your light in a dark, lost, confused world. Help us to shine. And on that note, our mission, as I always say, is to love God, to serve people, and to live